It is finally here. The damage formula of reverse 99. Well, sort of. I often got asked how damage is actually calculated in R99, and as nobody seemed to have the answer, I again took it upon myself to discover the secretive formula hidden within the game's code. And this is how a long journey of discovery begins. Alright, just joking. The Chinese community actually already did that. Who would have guessed? However, there's one thing about this which makes me question. Is it actually correct? If this formula is only theorized and hence unconfirmed, how can we know? Alright, back to Google Sheets and spending activity it is. And as always, if you want to check out the sheet for yourself, the link is in the description. Let's get started. As always, I sent my Russian girl Lilia in stage 214 hard mode and let her fight over and over against the almighty Guiding One's creation. Lilia is Insight 3, level 60, Resonance 9 and P1. She will be using Thunderous Applause A1, E3 level 60 for the first test and Brave New World A1, E2 level 40 for the second test. Noting down all her stats and the opposing enemy stat... Wait, Reality Defense A. What TF is that supposed to mean? Ah well, we will come back to that later. Thunderous gives Lilia an extra 16% crit damage for her ultimate as well as Crosswind Takeoff, so we have to note down this separately. Let's do some magic. And by that I mean copy-pasting the Theorized formula and inserting our own numbers. We will get some new cool looking numbers. Now we send Lilia on her kamikaze trip and return with the actual damage inflicted. Filling this into the formula, we notice, well, that does not match up. Which honestly makes sense, because Reality Def A is not a number. So I played around with that number for a bit and came up with 397. And now we are honestly looking pretty close to the actual number inflicted. However, the critical damage still seems somewhat off. Having another look at the formula, enemies might have critical defense, which lowers the critical damage taken. So I adjusted the numbers for a bit as well, and in the end all these numbers seem to match up. Great, the formula seems to be absolutely correct. At least until now. Let's continue. Adding Beacon Bloom to the team, she now debuffs our target before we do things. Adding all the numbers to the sheet and doing some calculations, and the numbers are off again. Not by that much, but they are off. At this point, I spent a few hours trying to figure out why, and honestly, I just couldn't. There is something which messes with this data, but I simply could not point my finger to it. So I let it rest for a bit and continued. Lilia got bored of Beacorn and left her behind, but this time she brought Brave New World instead of Thunderous with her. Doing the same stuff again as before, and while I wait for her ultimate to finally not crit, please, hello, can you not crit? We do some calculations. Finally, Lilia decided to not land a critical ultimate and we have our final data. However, this time the damage seems off, again, for the third time. So I played around with the Reality Defense again, and it turns out lowering that number down to 388 makes everything play out perfectly. Well, actually, not really. While the crosswind damage is only slightly off by 1 point, the ultimate damage seems to be way off this time. I honestly don't know yet why that is. However, at this point, it was clear. While the theorized damage formula seems to come very close to the actual damage reflected in-game, it is slightly off sometimes. Which means, take it with a grain of salt. It will give you a great overview on how the game handles damage, but it will not be 100% accurate. Except if I made a mistake, and if you do find it, please let me know in the comments. I would highly appreciate that. However, there's still something missing, because now that we know the approximated formula for calculating damage, we can make use of that honestly, and see which stats have the greatest influence on dealing damage, and which stat might even have diminishing returns. So back to Google Sheets it is, and a few minutes later, looking at the data, we can now see how investing an additional 100% crit damage into a character, without any other stats, will only get us a damage increase of about 5%. Increasing our crit rate by an additional 95% instead will get us very close to a simple attack increase. However, crit rate is way harder to come by than attack, so this will also not really suffice. The way the damage formula is working, you basically want stats of everything, since all stats are multiplying with each other. However, please keep in mind, this still assumes enemies do not have any resistances or defenses, since especially in the late game many enemies will have a high crit resistance or even crit damage reduction. These two stats will fall off really hard. I think the biggest takeaway is the initial first 20%. Adding 20% attack, crit rate, or even both to any character will give very similar results, and having 20% additional attack combined with 25% crit rate and no crit damage will only make you lose out on about 6% damage. However, this difference already doubles with just another 10%. Even if the formula is not 100% accurate, trying to add all stats evenly will likely bring you the most damage for most characters. However, the most important takeaway is that all multiplicative scale of the attack stat, which is reduced by a flat amount equal to the enemy's defense, making defense threat, penetration, and defense taken increases the most valuable stats. Thank you for watching. Peace.